Obviously, the track limits issue brings you here, Lewis. How did it feel in Q1? Were you beginning to feel a little bit more comfortable with the car towards the end of the session?
Not particularly. I was the same as I was for the rest of the weekend. So we made some changes. The car didn't feel terrible. I think it was not so easy to. It was even tough for us. We had to put a second set on just to get through Q1. So not great. And then from my side, another mistake. So I really got to look internal. I got to apologize to my team because it's just unacceptable to be out in both Q1s. It's very, very poor performance for myself.
Yeah, listen, you've had 6 poles here, you've won here 5 times. Might get rain tomorrow. Are you set up for that? Would you do anything radical, like take the car out to change the setup for tomorrow?
We can't do anything, so
apart from you wouldn't do a pit lane or anything like that.
I don't think there's really much we can do, so I just try and start from where I am and see where I can get from there.
Just finally, bigger picture. You've got a lot of bigger picture issues with the team you want to set it right. Even Charles saying similar kind of things, that maybe this year you can't add an awful lot of performance. Between the two of you, is that sort of uppermost in the mind right now, getting somehow set for next year better?
I mean, there's a huge... We're trying to do the best with what we have, and then obviously everyone's working flat out back at the factory. We have had upgrades, so but I think that's probably it for the rest of the year, and then I think the focus is now back at the factory, at least, is to focus on next year's car. This season's been a tricky one.
Better luck.
Can a worldwide heptacampion like Lewis Hamilton be a victim of a team that does not know how to build a car to measure? What happened in Belgium with Ferrari was not just a bad classification. It was a sign of internal crisis. In the world of Formula One, there are days that mark a before and after in a pilot's career. For Lewis Hamilton, Spa-Francorchamps 2025 not only represented a setback in sports, but a brutal exhibition of everything that is broken within the Ferrari project. It was not simply being out in Q1, it was a structural collapse of trust, technique and mutual understanding between one of the best pilots in history and an unable team, until now, to provide a competitive environment. Hamilton was eliminated in Q1 not one, but twice during the weekend. First in the sprint classification on Friday and then again in the main classification of Saturday. But it was not an isolated bad pace or an unfortunate day. The problem was much deeper. On Friday, his session ended humiliatingly with a spin in the chicane, caused by such a violent rear block that Lewis himself confessed that it was something he had never felt in his career. This statement is not less. We are talking about a pilot who has competed in more than 300 large awards, in all kinds of conditions and configurations. For mechanical behavior to take it by surprise at this level, it has to be a significant failure, not a driving error. And on Saturday, when he tried to recover ground, his fast lap was annulled to exceed the track limits in Eau Rouge Radelen. But even this error, typically associated with pressure or lack of concentration, must be understood in context. Spa is one of the most technical circuits in the world, and doing it in a sprint weekend, with such a short time of filming, amplifies any lack of the car. The SF25 not only did not give Hamilton confidence, but left it exposed. He could not explore the limits because he did not feel that the car reacts with predictability. He was, as he himself suggested, fighting the car, not driving it. And this is where everything aggravates. It turns out that the rear component that generated behavioral problems that Friday had already given alarm signals months ago, when Charles Leclerc used it in Montreal and suffered an accident in the FP1. Ferrari knew that this element had problems, and still decided to install it in the Hamilton car for Spa, one of the fastest and fastiest and demanding calendar paths. This decision not only reveals a lack of control in the management of critical components, but also a surprising disconnection in the evaluation of technical risk. The decision to try this piece for the first time in Lewis's car, and do it right in a sprint weekend with limited adaptation time, reflects an uncoordinated technical strategy. The Scuderia chose to risk a new element instead of building trust with a known setup. And he did it with his new star signing, in one of the most visible events in the calendar. The result was disastrous. Not only because of the performance, but because now all the pressure, all the narrative revolves around the failure of Hamilton. When in reality, the real problem is under the surface. Poorly calculated technical decisions, lack of understanding with the pilot, and an internal structure that, rather than push forward, is generating friction. What happened in Spa cannot be reduced to a couple of errors. It was the public expression of an internal fracture. A pilot lost in the erratic behavior of a car that does not speak to him in his language. a team that seems to be testing solutions without really knowing what the problem is. And above all, a still immature relationship, which begins to show symptoms of wear before reaching its first competitive climax. When Ferrari brought his new rear suspension system to Spa-Francorchamps, he did it as who bets his last file with the hope of reverse a negative streak. It was a long-worked update, whose design had been carefully developed in Maranello for months. The objective was clear: to recover acceleration stability, control the wear of the Plancon, one of the great Achilles heels of the SF25 in the first part of the championship, and offer the car a more stable aerodynamic base on which to build trust. This new suspension promised up to 3/10 for return in ideal stages. On paper, it was the type of development that can change the dynamics of a season. The design key was in the rearrangement of the front arm of the upper wishbone, reduced by 30 millimeters. That single modification completely altered the anti-quat geometry of the car. When raising the support point of the set, the SF25 could better resist the sinking effect when the pilot applied acceleration after a curve. The benefit, in addition to greater traction control, was a more stable platform that kept the car in the ideal aerodynamic window for a longer time. In theory, this was going to translate into better passage, more ease of maintaining braking stability, and lower sensitivity to track conditions. However, what seemed like a promising technical evolution ended up being a headache for Hamilton. From his first kilometers with the new configuration in the filming day in Mugello, his feelings were, in the best, ambiguous. He felt the same as before, he said without enthusiasm. That seemingly simple phrase is actually a devastating technical diagnosis. When an update of this magnitude does not modify the behavior perceived by the pilot, it means that the problem is in another part of the car, or worse, that the entire package does not respond to its inputs in a coherent way. And here appears one of the central dilemmas that Ferrari seems to have ignored. Hamilton's driving style and the behavior of the updated SF25 are completely discouraged. Hamilton has built his career about absolute control of the rear train. Its technique depends on stopping late, rotating the car aggressively, and applying power with precision. It is a reactive style which gets the best of the car in dynamic scenarios, but that needs a predictable and responsive rear axle. The new suspension system, designed to offer progressivity and softness in the change of loads, favors exactly the opposite: a linear transition more suitable for the methodical and fluid style of Leclerc. And this is where a devastating paradox arises. The same component that allowed Charles Leclerc to find stability and attack more in classification, as he did when he was third in the main quali on Saturday, is the one that caused Hamilton to feel more insecure. It is not a defect of the system itself, but a total disconnection between the technical design and the needs of one of the pilots. Instead of being an adaptation tool, the suspension became a barrier. Ferrari not only did not take into account this style difference. In addition, in its hurry to implement the system, he tried it for the first time in a weekend with sprint format, with only one free session to collect data and adjust the setup. For a pilot who is learning a new car, a new work dynamic, and that also comes from years in a completely different team, that decision was a capitalized strategic error. Hamilton was asked to adapt to the car, the system, and an experimental tuning, all in a period of time that is literally dangerous in Spa. The result was a series of track errors that are not due to its lack of level, but to a structure that did not know how to protect its pilot in the integration process. Hamilton is not only dealing with a car that does not represent it. He is facing the isolation of not being heard as he was accustomed. And that, more than any spinning, more than any elimination in Q1, is what may break a pilot. Because when the conviction is lost that your voice has weight, the motivation to push the limits is also lost. It enters a state of conservation, of doubt, of emotional disconnection with the machine. And that is the most dangerous thing that can happen to an elite competitor. What happened with Lewis Hamilton in the 2025 Belgian GP is not a simple isolated episode on a bad sports run. It is a mirror that reflects an awkward truth. Even the biggest, even the champions with more victories, poles, and titles in history can be vulnerable when the environment does not know how to read them. The Spa weekend was not a story of lack of talent or age. It was a disconnection story of technical decisions that do not take into account the sensibilities of a pilot, of a team that has not yet understood who he has behind the wheel. Ferrari needs to make an urgent decision. Are you going to continue developing the SF25 in one direction, favoring Leclerc because its short-term results validate that technical line? Or will you assume the challenge of building a versatile car that allows both pilots to compete on equal terms? This is not just a matter of competitiveness. It is a matter of respect for Hamilton's figure. Because if the pilots who have won everything are heard, What message is Ferrari sending to their own structure? On the other hand, Hamilton also faces his own dilemma. Should you continue to adapt to a car that clearly does not speak your language? Or do you have to exert internal pressure, demand structural and technical changes that return it to the center of the project? The truth is that time is not on its side. It has a limited window to transform this opportunity into a legacy. And every weekend as the Spa reduces that margin,